we have three panelists with us today, and so I just want everyone to acknowledge who you are or share out who you are, please.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. I'm Dr. Zach Morris. I'm an associate professor at Stony Brook University at our School of Social Work, and I'm very excited to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Joyce Roberson Steele. I'm a doctoral lecturer in the social work department here at Medgar, and I'm happy to be with you also.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Ikemba. I'm a professor and graduate of Medgar College and community organizer.
Okay, thank you. So I need to highlight that Dr. Sampson was scheduled to be with us today, but due to circumstances, she will not be able to join us today, okay? So the title of our discussion today is When Rights Are Rolled Back, Reclaiming Humanity in Dehumanizing Times. And I want to begin by first giving a definition of dehumanizing, right? Taken from Merriam-Webster. And it's defined as, it is the act of depriving people of human qualities, dignity, or individuality, treating them as subhuman objects or machines. So with that said, I want us to dive into it, and I'm going to begin with the first question, and anyone is welcome to address it. The first question is, in what ways can social work education better prepare students to confront dehumanizing systems?
I'll start off. I believe that as social workers, we realize that all of the different things that are happening right now have happened before. So this is a vicious cycle, and we want to start pausing and taking time to not only teach theory and focus more on reality, because our students are suffering in these same systems that we're asking them to support clients in. So we have to take the time out to address these issues. A lot of people say, I unplug from the news. I don't want to see it. And I want to unplug, but I can't because I have to bring it up in my classroom. I have to talk about the things that we don't want to talk about. And even in doing my research, I found out that a large part of the African-American population, especially older adults, don't talk to their children about a lot of the bad things that happened in the past. I don't know about you, but I was taught not to talk about religion or politics. That's what my dad told me. And I followed that rule for a long time. When you're in settings, don't talk about that. But I'm like, this is what we need to talk about. Even though we may have to agree to disagree, we have to have these heavy conversations. So I believe that we need to start off by first facing the realities that we're in, talking about how they affect us, because sometimes you have to own up to how it affects you, and maybe the student can see it for what it is and how it will affect then others. And then I also think that we need to do a better job at the history. The speaker talked about just finding out about history and all the different things that have happened in our history that are now being taken away, because every time we know our history, then we have strength. So we have to do better with the historical perspective and take the time out. If it's not in the books, then we need to still put it in our curriculums.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Dr. Morris?
First thing is, I think social workers should be in politics. I think we really can't shy away from politics. I think we are preternaturally suited for politics in ways that we are needed. We heard the earlier keynote speaker talk about polarization, which is really a plague here, right? It's a very dangerous thing happening in our politics today, and I think social workers are really needed in the political arena to calm things, to bring perspective, to bring the voice of what's happening on the ground. So I think that's a very important thing, is to not be afraid to engage in politics, to view politics not as a negative word, but as a positive thing to be engaged in, and to not shy away from it. The second thing I think, I tell my students is we need to document harm. Right, we're living through, in my eyes, one of the biggest retrenchments of our welfare state. Of our generation, of my generation, certainly, that is about to happen. We have a big tsunami coming at us with the One Big Beautiful Bill changes, and we're going to need to pay a lot of attention to responding to these changes coming, and also documenting the impact of these changes, and bringing voice and attention to those impacts and the real hardships they're going to create for our communities. So I think as much as we might feel overwhelmed by the politics, we need to step in the arena, and we can't shy away from it, and we need to do it in many different ways to really protect the communities that we're serving.
Thank you for that. So, Dr. Steele, what I heard you indicate that resonated with me at the moment is that you indicated it's important to share our experiences in terms of helping others that may not have experienced these things in the past, more or less, to understand that what we experienced in the past can certainly repeat itself in the future. Correct, thank you. So with that said, I want to pose this question. How do you personally stay grounded in empathy and ethics when advocating in hostile or dehumanizing environments?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. Well, before I answer that question, I want to say I'm not a social worker. I'm a historian, so thank you for letting me into y'all.
Yes. Welcome.
And it's all connected, though. And as far as, if I may, just with the first question, I'll briefly say, I think it's important to take a decolonial approach. We're still in the process of decolonizing our minds, our behaviors, our institutions. So I think when we're talking about the dehumanization of African people and other colonized people, if we want to use the color code, black, red, yellow people, our institutions have to come through that approach. It has to be Black-centered or indigenous-centered, because our experiences are different than those who are developing these institutions of oppression and exploitation. So we have to see the lens, we have to develop solutions through the lens of our own experiences. As far as grounded, spirituality for me, I'm always just like personally developing, looking at different African spiritual systems, and just in general spiritual systems, because they're all connected. So I think like with this, when we're working with people who have been marginalized, we have to understand that we have also been impacted and affected by these institutions, and making sure we're continuously developing ourselves. Like the previous speaker, he talked about seeing the therapist, right? So just finding a way, understanding that you've been impacted and looking for ways to address your own issues before you go out there and try to address someone else's issues.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
I agree with you 100%. I try to stay grounded mostly by taking time out for myself, because I'm one of those people who used to feel guilty for doing that. Guilty for resting, guilty for not having a big calendar of things to do. And I would busy myself with being busy. And my dad would say that. He's 93, God bless him. And he'd say, oh, you busy doing busy work. But what are you really doing? And I had to think about that. So I stay grounded by trying to stay alert of my health, of my need to rest. I liked when you told your story. I'm from Myrtle Avenue. I'm from Sumner Projects. I'm from Myrtle Avenue too. That's right. So I like to remember where I came from. I like to be able to be in different settings and show my students also that I can be cool with the coolest, but I can get up with the get ups too, and you got to know how to wear those different hats and represent yourself and have your voice be heard. So I also stay grounded by remembering my past and using it as a tool, using it as one of my superpowers as it relates to me now being in a field of academia.
Dr. Andrews, I have a question, a follow-up question for you. How can knowledge of colonial education systems guide social workers, educators, and policymakers in preventing dehumanization in today's institutions?
Yeah, appreciate the question. I want to say, could you repeat it one more time? I want to make sure.
I can, yes.
Yeah.
How can knowledge of colonial education systems guide social workers, educators, and policymakers?
Yeah, I think it's important. The first things first, because I know that everyone may not define our reality or situation or phenomena as a colonial situation. Like this is, as African people who have been brought into this country and indigenous people who were here when the Europeans came to the shores of this of the Americas, they have historically been impacted by the system of colonialism. And it's not a thing of the past. And I feel that it's very important that we begin to define our relationship to those who, I'm gonna just say the colonizers or Europeans who developed. I want to be straight up and frank with you all. Those who set up the institution, American institution, it was a colonial project. So we are a part of a colonial design. Once we understand that, then I feel as though we can begin to get to the business of solving all of the social issues that we are dealing with. Because all of the social problems that we experience is a result of colonialism and imperialism. So even when we look around the world today and we see American expansion in the Middle East, for instance, because this is the most recent thing, all of that is part of this colonial project. So once you understand that, you can begin to develop institutions that are anti-colonial. As social workers, if you're not going into the communities with this, I think with this framework, then you begin to just put a Band-Aid on the problem rather than really overturning the fundamental contradiction. So you're gonna find yourself always having to address the social issue and not necessarily eradicating our communities of the social issue. So understanding like what our ancestors had did to address colonialism through education, and just to go back to some of our ancestors during the antebellum period, because as a historian, one of the things that I looked at as how our communities came together and addressed illiteracy, addressed poverty, and they developed schools and they developed institutions such as free societies to address all of these problems. And I think that there's something that we can actually learn from our ancestors who developed free societies, Black women's clubs, and learn what they did to address the social problems in our community. And also the what they could have did to, I think, sustain those institutions, because when we talk about the free societies and Black women's clubs, many of these institutions aren't around today. For the most part, they're not around. And so understanding what we're doing, whatever work that we're doing in the community, it has to be linked to nation building. And I'll talk more about that later, but I think it's important that everything that we do is linked to nation building. Otherwise, we're perpetuating the system that's creating the social issues in the first place.
Thank you for that. I think it leads to, yes. Thank you, Dr. Andrews. I think it leads to this next question, which is, what role does communal responsibility play in fostering systemic change? And how can social workers mobilize communities effectively?
Well, I'll cite our keynote speaker earlier saying community is medicine. And I think that is true. When in social work, we talk a lot about the person and the environment. We also talk about the social determinants of health. And what do we mean by the environment? Well, we mean the community, we mean the neighborhood, we mean the air you're breathing, we mean the policy context that you're living, right? These are all things that matter for your health. And I think community is an essential one. And we were talking about the loneliness epidemic, right? We know that we are more disconnected than ever. More people saying they lack companionship, feel socially excluded, feel left out. These is how we measure and track loneliness, right? So building community is key for combating that epidemic. And actually, I cite a lot is a historian, philosopher of the Holocaust named Hannah Arendt, who researched and studied the origins of totalitarianism. And one of her big ideas in this classic work was that loneliness was the critical underlying precondition towards the Holocaust to German totalitarianism and Nazism in that country, right? That social disconnectedness makes people vulnerable to extreme thoughts, makes people vulnerable to dehumanizing others. So building community, if we take Arendt's theory at face value, building community is essential work for humanizing our culture, building a nation that brings dignity and worth to everybody, and that makes sure everyone is included. And I think that it starts in our neighborhoods. It starts in our. I think about it on our floors of our apartment buildings, right? It starts at home and extends outward. And I think it's a critical thing that we do, and that social workers have a responsibility to do, both in our jobs and outside of our jobs. Yeah.
I think that one of the ways that we can continue to build community, again, is to go back to our history and remember that we utilized our churches, we utilized our neighbors, block association groups, clubs, things of that nature to lean on each other, to share information, to support each other. The smallest things, people suffer in silence alone, and if you could just feel that you can ask for support and help and it's readily there. Sometimes there are so many things that people don't know that are available right in their communities. We were talking about that earlier during lunch. People just don't know, even though they have the access to AI or they have access to Google it. They don't even have the concept in their mind, especially when you're going through a stressful time, to think about what it is that's best for you. So sometimes as social workers, we need to bring it out. We need to come out of the offices. We need to come out of the classrooms. We need to come into the community and bring out whatever topic we might have that is of concern. My students and I from Medgar, we do the voters registration tables a lot on the premises, and we were doing that, and they were coming back, and we would debrief about it, and they were saying, people don't want to come to our table. They said they don't want to vote. They said the system's rigged. I said, go back out there, right? Go back out there and talk to them. He said, your people. And if the system is rigged, you still got to be in it to win it, right? The lotto system is rigged, but you still play it, right? You pull that dollar out when it's time for some, big, large amount to be pulled. So you got to be in it anyhow. But what we did change was now at our table, and we would go from classroom to classroom, and we would explain to each other, the peers, peer learning. The students would explain. They have elevator pitches they're working on now, right? where you go into a classroom and you just talk about the Electoral College and how it's developed and what it is and why one state may have more voting, abilities than another, or talk about what do you do if you're not able to vote? Because we had a large amount of students who were not eligible to vote. So we automatically assumed that everybody could, and they could not. And we gathered a lot of information, did a survey, we're doing research, and they're very proud of where they're coming from. Now we have 73 students that have registered to vote this semester. So we are getting there. But it took us coming out the classroom, and I had to talk to my chair, and he's like, get in that classroom, get to teaching it. I don't know if he's here, I don't see you. And get to teaching. But I was like, we are teaching. We're not in the classroom, but they're learning. They're learning that you have to pull your sleeves up and you have to do the work. And they would not learn that from a book. How to deal with another student that says, get out of my face, I'm not interested. How do you deal with that when you have this great thing you want to talk about and people don't want to hear it? What do you do? And that's the things that they're talking about, because that's the things that's going to happen when they're out there in the real world and they're doing this work. Mm-hmm. So I feel very good about that, in that way that we're trying to make that change and make them grow.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing out the innovative ways in which you're addressing the issues. So my next question is open to anyone on the panel. Are there historical or contemporary examples where collective social work efforts successfully reverse systemic harm? And if so, what lessons did we learn?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this earlier too with the Free African Societies and the Black Women's Clubs. So I think those are good examples of the community. We were just talking about the community coming together to address an issue within the community that is not being addressed by the government, because a lot of times we talked about resources earlier and not having a lot of resources. We have communities that weren't receiving resources at all, so they had to come together and pull go into their pockets and address these systemic harms. So I think during the antebellum period again, you see the problem of our community, our children being undereducated or not being educated at all. So reversing that illiteracy or undereducation, that was something that was done during that period. Black women's clubs and other organizations during the Reconstruction period and right after Reconstruction, again, addressing problems such as education, what would you call it? Taking care of the children, but caring for the child care. Thank you. So child care and people not having resources, even if there's health complications and they can't afford to go see a doctor. So we were doing that, and also just when last example is during the Civil Rights Movement, I think, and the Black Power movement, you would see our communities, again, people like Septima Clark and others would come together and develop these citizenship schools and freedom schools, again, to address, you spoke about voting earlier. One of the issues was the literacy test that a lot of all the African Americans had to take to be able to vote. They had to pass these literacy tests. So Septima Clark, I think Bernice Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, they came together and developed these schools to address that literacy issue, where thousands of African Americans, tens of thousands of African Americans could now pass these literacy tests and vote, right? So again, that's our community coming together and addressing harm, and I think we can learn from those acts, but as well, again, I just want to emphasize, I think the importance is to connect all of the work that we're doing to nation building, because my fundamental understanding of this system is that it's a colonial project in design, and we don't want to just receive this education, get our degrees, and go out there and be a part of the problem, right, by just putting a Band-Aid on it and not necessarily overturning the fundamental contradiction, which I believe is colonialism, and I would say capitalism.
Thank you.
Almost forgot the question.
Historical.
Okay, so historically, I'm sorry, it's the after lunch effect. So historically, I automatically go to the civil rights movement, and that's what I think about. And I think about there's a little short movie out. I don't know if you ever seen it. It's called From Swastika to Jim Crow, and it's a very interesting movie because it talks about the end of World War II and a lot of Jewish people, a lot of Jewish educators came to the United States and they were not accepted the way you might think they were. You know, I thought coming up, we won the war and, they came here and everybody was happy, but they talk about how people lost people in the war, so people weren't very happy that they were here and people were not giving them opportunities to get jobs in some of these big Ivy League schools that they wanted to go to work. So they found themselves in the Deep South and a lot of the HBCUs, and they were accepted there. And they supported people of color in their fight for civil rights. And they were just full of these professors, and they talk all through the movie about it, the black people and the Jewish people, about how they work together and how they strategize, and they learned so many things from their experience in Germany, and so they brought it here and they were strategizing and helping them to figure out how to fight this, especially when it was the nonviolent portion of fighting, right? And how successful they was with supporting people, and then they showed the students that went through the HBCUs and how they went on and on to great backgrounds, and they did wonderful things in their life. So I say all that to say that we're in the heart of Crown Heights. And a lot of times when I talk to my students, they feel the divide because you have Crown Heights here and you have a strong Jewish population on Eastern Parkway, and it's like a separation. And I grew up in Bed-Stuy, so I was between Crown Heights and Williamsburg, so I was seeing it on both sides. And what I would tell my students is, let's learn some things from this group of people. I spoke earlier and I said that from my research, a lot of the older adults told me that they did not want to talk to their family members about racism, about some of their bad experiences in the Deep South, because first of all, it was re-triggering for them. And then they wanted to spare the young people from having to deal with that. But in sparing them, I've concluded that we have a large amount of a generation that don't really understand the suffering and the hard work that their family members went through. So I'm going somewhere. Everybody. So I fast forward back to I graduated with my PhD from Yeshiva University. And I started, after I watched that movie, and not I by myself, but me and a group of people started an anti-racist coalition at Yeshiva University, which was really, really different. So we wanted to see people of color are going to the school. We want to see ourselves in the curriculum. We want to see ourselves on the walls, pictures of ourselves. We want to have part of this university because we are paying our tuition, and many of us without any scholarship, because a lot of the scholarships you couldn't get unless you were Jewish born. So we started a coalition to support people of color. And I tell my students here, you have to make noise. I think somebody said, wherever you are at, do it right there. I tell them, you're right here. Let's look. Other groups of people stick together. Other groups of people support each other, even if they don't know each other. They see each other and they help each other. And it doesn't take a lot to help someone. We have to stop being gatekeepers and hiding everything, crab in the barrel mentality. We have to stop it because we're our worst enemies when we do that. So I talk to them. So I say, yeah, you say a lot of things about people 2 blocks down, but check out what they're doing. You don't want to vote, but believe me, the politicians are listening to what they're saying because they know that they're going to vote, and they know you're not going to vote. So let's make the change. Let's show them meaning the politicians, that you work for us and we are going to be serious about who's in these offices, and they need to know me because they need to make decisions for me also.
Thank you. Okay, this will serve as the last question, and hence, it's something that I think is one of the pressing questions thus far, because I oftentimes tell students that the lessons that we learn doesn't necessarily come from a textbook. It comes from sharing out our experiences, right? So the last question is to the panel. Can you discuss the role of storytelling or narrative theory in restoring dignity and agency to marginalized populations?
Great question. So my research is all about the affordability crisis. I don't know if you know, but we are in a prolonged and I think accelerating affordability crisis right now. The cost of living going up. And my research is all about the cost of living with a disability, all the disability-related expenses that people have. And we've done a lot of quantitative research surveying people with disabilities from across the country about how much it costs to live, things like assistive technologies or paying for caregiving or modifying your house for a wheelchair, right? Lots of different expenses, and we estimate it's $1 for every $5 a person with a disability has goes to their disability-related costs. So that's a 20% tax, a disability tax that people with disabilities have. So I've done a lot of quantitative research on this, and I've been talking to policymakers. In no better way am I able to get that story across. Those numbers help than actually bringing lived experience and stories of people day to day about what we call the disability squeeze. I have a podcast called The Disability Squeeze. I have a website. We have a storytelling. We're collecting stories on the affordability crisis facing disabled people. And I think those stories, travel, right, in ways that my numbers, which I think help elevate their stories, can only go so far. But when you hear about people who are cutting what they can afford for food or aren't cutting, failing to make rent to pay for their medications or for fixing their accessible vehicle, right? That it's a very powerful thing, and I think our stories are an essential ingredient in policy change, and I appreciate that question.
Thank you.
I love storytelling. I think that it really builds pride. It instills in your memory. It is something that allows you to connect and bring out reality. I love qualitative research because I like to give people an opportunity to. I don't want to assume. I just don't want only numbers. I want to know what your experience was, so that I can better understand how that will affect whatever policy or procedure or any intervention that we might provide will help you. So I love to hear the stories, but I just like I said in every other response, historically and culturally, we are storytellers, right? And that is how we function, and that's how we pass on our dignity and pass on our successes and let people know how they can make it because somebody else made it, and just draw that connection. So I think that to continue that gives a voice to people, and it says, I see you, I hear you, and even in this crazy, very, very fast-paced world we're living in, I'm pausing to understand you, and I think people need that more than anything right now.
Thank you.
So storytelling, that's what I do for a living, so I appreciate this question. When you asked the question, I thought about Sankofa, and Sankofa is a tree word that means don't be afraid to go back and fetch what was lost. And that is, the Sankofa, that concept, particularly in the Americas, developed as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, and many of those who were victims of the transatlantic slave trade understood that they had to restore that connection with Africa. But that concept could be utilized for all people who have lost that connection with your ancestors, which is, again, a result of colonialism. And I think it's very important. I bring that up. Du Bois talks about this, for instance, and he talks about all structural oppression. And in this instance, we're talking about colonialism, imperialism, but all structural oppression, whether it's racism, capitalism, has to be accompanied by cultural oppression. And when you're talking about, there's various ways people can be oppressed culturally, but one of those ways is through the denial of their history, going back to Sankofa. That's why that needs to be restored. And so when you look at what Trump is doing in particular, and what many people in the Republican Party across the United States are doing, as far as trying to wipe out Black history. I mean, recently there was an executive order to remove all of the mural statues, exhibits that is deemed anti-American or may be divisive, right? But it's them who are anti-Black that's determining what's divisive, and that's why it's so important that we control our institutions and develop anti-colonial institutions. So storytelling, again, just to make briefly the connection, those exhibits is what shapes our collective memory. These are cultural memory systems that every society develops. And so this is an attack on our cultural memory systems because they want to shape the way that we see the past and the way that we see ourselves. And so they'll erect a statue of Albert Pike, who some say was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, a statue that was removed but then put back under the Trump administration. But they'll remove any remnants of slavery taking place in this country, which was central to the development of the United States of America. Right, so I think it's important to understand this movement. If they want to take away, if they want to wipe out history, we have to ask ourselves, why do they not want us to know that? And the last thing I would say, just in regards to that, is collective memory is important. Just imagine if everyone in here, people of color, Black, brown, and other, had shared the same collective memory and understood that we have a mission to build our nations and to build our communities, not necessarily just get a job, get paid, and hopefully I can address some problems and some issues in the community. But we say, hey, collectively, we're in this to develop institutions that's anti-colonial, to bring our people together, empower our people, and to not necessarily be a part of this system. And I think it's important for us to understand we don't necessarily have to perpetuate the system. I know we're a part of it, but we don't necessarily have to continue this system of oppression and exploitation. As a matter of fact, it's antiquated. Capitalism is a system that's antiquated, but they want you to think that that's the end of history. I'm gonna stop there because I think I could probably keep talking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
I feel like I was going to keep on talking.
And thank you to the panelists today. I think you gave us some great insight to where we are and where we need to go. With that said, we're going to now open up the floor for questions and answers.